I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
It is the most popular space adventure of all time.
Exciting is hardly the word I would choose.
It's one of the most groundbreaking sagas in Hollywood history.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
It captured imaginations with an irresistible force.
You've taken your first step into a larger world.
And catapulted 3 young performers to superstardom.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
My whole life was changed by the opportunities that came to me through the success of Star Wars.
It really is a wonderful morality tale.
I'll never turn to the dark side.
It's George's vision, and he truly is a visual man in a profound way.
But the Star Wars trilogy didn't just change the way we look at movies. It changed the way that movies are made.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
There's so many accomplishments that George has done that really has changed the business as we know it.
We did it!
What began as a galactic fairy tale became a success story beyond one man's wildest dreams.
The Force will be with you, always.
I expected not to ever make a hit movie. That wasn't my agenda. I certainly didn't expect Star Wars to be this giant hit. But it became such a phenomenon.
It's hard to remember a time before Star Wars. The world was different then. There were no cell phones or personal computers. The internet was years away. Even home video had yet to catch on. The space race was over.
That's one small step for man.
Americans felt deeply mired in the present. It was a time of economic inflation and rising oil prices. And the nation had grown cynical about its heroes and its leaders.
Well, I'm not a crook.
In our country, Watergate tore us apart. And then we had the Vietnam War on top of that, which was dividing the nation like nothing else had. It was a terrible decade of great storm and violence in our history.
On the big screen, Hollywood's view was equally grim. The films of the early 1970s were gritty and often downbeat, a reflection of America's social and political upheaval. Instead of old-fashioned heroes, the screen was dominated by hard-nosed anti-heroes who broke all the rules.
In the late 60s, the Warners, the Xanax, all the people that started the studios in the first place were retiring, and they were selling the studios to corporations. They were beverage companies and all kinds of they were in other businesses. They didn't know at all how to run a movie studio. All they know is if the marketing department said people want to see this, then you make that. So they started marketing pictures and studying the demographics and all these kinds of things, and they realized that there was a market for films made by young people for young people because the young person was becoming a bigger part of their market.
The studio system that lasted for decades had now collapsed, and Hollywood executives, desperate to connect with younger audiences, turned to film schools to find the next generation of movie makers.
Action.
It was in this atmosphere of change that gifted young directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, and Steven Spielberg brought a more personal sensibility to the screen.
It was a state of confusion, and a lot of filmmakers got to make projects that they ordinarily wouldn't have gotten to make. And I got caught right in the middle of it.
George was the kind of maverick from Northern California, an independent filmmaker who was always extremely proud that he had very few attachments to Hollywood.
Born in Modesto, California, George Lucas grew up reading adventure stories and watching movie serials on television. But it wasn't until college that his own dreams of filmmaking began to surface. In 1963, he left Modesto to attend film classes at the University of Southern California.
I was teaching at USC, and George was in one of the seminars. We talked about some of his early attempts at filmmaking. And I'll tell you, right from the beginning, George had a unique vision.
George was a guy that thought out of the box, as you can certainly see by his student film THX 1138. And he shot a film that was 20 minutes long. It was supposed to be 5 minutes. But he got a great deal of recognition and opened the eyes of the professors that kids could do something out of the box, beyond what the restrictions were.
Lucas won acclaim for his technical skills and imagination as a storyteller. His interest in mythology and philosophy gave his work an added dimension.
George's style was fantastic.
Incredible.
I don't care what he was doing, it just looked more personal than some of the other work.
After graduating from USC, Lucas joined his friend Francis Ford Coppola in San Francisco, where in 1969, Coppola founded American Zoetrope, an independent film company.
I came up with no intention of actually becoming successful, but I did have a very strong feeling about being able to be in control of my work and not having people tamper with it.
In 1971, Lucas directed THX 1138, a theatrical feature based on his student film. But when Warner Brothers executives saw the finished product, they demanded Coppola return the $300,000 the studio had advanced to develop THX and other projects. The fledgling company imploded, and Lucas had to find work elsewhere. He decided to take matters into his own hands and start his own company, Lucasfilm Limited. For his first project under this new banner, Lucas chose American Graffiti, an affectionate look at teenage cruising in the early 1960s.
I'm a ready Teddy. Well, get bent, turkey.
Produced by Universal Studios, it was loosely based on his own experiences as a car enthusiast growing up in Modesto.
I had gone from being extremely experimental and hard-edged, and then really taking up a challenge that Francis gave me. I bet you can't do just a silly comedy, you know, kind of warm and fuzzy comedy. So, okay, I'll try that.
The film was shot in just 28 days for under $1 million. Co-producing was another USC alumnus, Gary Kurtz.
Toward the end of the post-production on American Graffiti, we organized a screening at the North Point Cinema in San Francisco. And we felt the reaction to the film was quite positive. But Ned Tannen from Universal was very upset. He said, you shouldn't be showing it to an audience at this stage, and we were totally flabbergasted.
My first film they didn't understand, and they meddled with it after it was all finished. Same thing with my second film. The corporate entity came in and jerry-rigged with it, cut 5 minutes out.
But even before the release of American Graffiti, George Lucas's imagination was pointed at the stars.
All during this time, he was talking about the fact that he would like to do a Flash Gordon kind of 1930s space opera, and he started working on that in earnest.
And people said, well, all things to pick. Why in the world would you do that? I said, well, you know, it's fun to make films for young people. It's a chance to sort of make an impression on them. I want to do this.
With his galactic fairy tale, Lucas hoped to reinvent a classic genre. Among his influences were the writings of scholar and educator Joseph Campbell, in which he explored the origins of myth and world religions.
When Lucas was writing the script of Star Wars, he was heavily interested in Joseph Campbell. What Joseph Campbell was interested in was to see the connections between myths, the myths of different cultures, to try to find out what were the threads that tied all these very disparate cultures together.
I did research to try to distill everything down into motifs that would be universal. I attribute most of the success to the psychological underpinnings, which have been around for thousands of years, and the people still react the same way to the stories as they always have.
George is nothing if not a good reporter, And when he sets out to do his work, he starts reporting from the best sources he can gather. He brought Campbell into the process of looking at his work on Star Wars and saying, is this right? Am I getting it down? Is this the right emphasis? Is this the right character? Joseph Campbell said to me, the best student he ever had was George Lucas.
Like such epics as The Odyssey, Beowulf, and The Legend of King Arthur, Star Wars drew from a shared pool of mythic archetypes.
You have the youth who's on the adventure that you can identify with. You have the swashbuckler, and you have the damsel. She may not sort of have the reactions that are conventional, however, she is in distress. And you have the wise old man who you go and you find him, and you have the funnier characters. I mean, it really adheres strictly to that form.
It's the traditional ritualistic coming-of-age story. And when I went into the mythological side of what I wanted to do, that's a key factor with heroes.
By the summer of 1973, George Lucas had created a treatment that he felt was ready to shop around. Whether anyone would be interested, that was another story.
The most successful science fiction film at that point was 2001. And successful then was that it made about $24 million or something like that. Most hit science fiction films would make about $16 million, which was the Planet of the Apes films and that sort of thing. But most science fiction films would make under $10 million. I mean, there's no reason to think that it would do any different.
Star Wars was more space fantasy than science fiction, but its galactic setting made it a tough sell in 1973.
When I was pitching the film, all I had was like a 14-page story treatment. It was very vague. Said it's kind of a 1930s action-adventure Saturday afternoon serial based on the kind of Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers kind of comic book future. And that's about all they knew about it.
In the 70s, science fiction seemed to be all about apocalyptic societies and death and destruction. Not very inspiring, so we were fighting an uphill battle with the science fiction project.
George Lucas brought Star Wars to Universal and United Artists. Both studios passed on the project, but the ambitious young filmmaker was secretly relieved. The last thing he wanted was to hand his dream project to the wrong people.
He didn't care for the studio system. He used it because there was no other way of doing what he needed to do.
Undaunted, Lucas presented Star Wars to Alan Ladd Jr., the new head of creative affairs at 20th Century Fox. Ladd, a former producer, was able to recognize potential in the filmmaker, if not necessarily the film.
We had a meeting, and George said, well, I've been thinking about this thing called Star Wars, and told me about it. And I said, that sounds terrific. I mean, the technology part of the whole thing was completely over my head, but I just believed in him and his genius. I sort of recognized off of American Graffiti that he really was a genius, so I just flew with it.
He understood what talent was. He respected talent, and he was able to say, I think this guy's talented. I think we're going to invest in him. So Alan Ladd Jr. invested in me. He did not invest in the movie, and it paid off.
In 1973, Ladd's investment in George Lucas proved justified. American Graffiti was finally released to rave reviews and became the third highest grossing picture of the year. It went on to earn more than $100 million worldwide.
American Graffiti showed a very human center and a huge heart that George has always had, by the way. And I think that surprised a lot of people.
With a preliminary deal for Star Wars in place, Lucas began writing his screenplay in 1974. It proved more ambitious than he had first imagined. The filmmaker was able to distill his idea down to its essence, an epic battle between a heroic rebel alliance and an evil galactic empire. The chief villain, Darth Vader, was there practically from the start, but it took time to come up with Star Wars' three main heroes: a plucky young princess named Leia Organa, the fearless Corellian smuggler known as Han Solo, and most important, an idealistic farm boy whose original name was Luke Starkiller. Over the course of his adventure, Luke trains to become a Jedi Knight, deriving his power from a mystical energy known as the Force. But along the way, the script went through radical changes. At one point, Luke was a 60-year-old general, and Han Solo had green skin and gills. Even the concept of the Force had yet to be fully realized. Instead, there was the Kyber crystal, a sort of galactic holy grail.
The concept of the Force was an important one in the story, and the difficulty is trying to create a religious, spiritual concept that works in a very simple way without heavy exposition or without it seeming to pull down the story.
It got to be a very fat script, about 200 pages, and the story had gotten away from me. So the only way I could cope with it was to say, I'll take the first third, the first act, and I'll make that into a movie. But I'd written all this other stuff. I'd spent a year writing this story, and I said, well, I'm not going to just throw away 2/3 of my year and say, this is all I can afford at this point. This is the only amount of money I'm going to get us to do this one movie. So I put it on the shelf, and I said, by hook or by crook, I will finish this movie.
But Star Wars wouldn't be cheap. To get the Fox Board of Directors to approve the necessary budget, Lucas needed something dramatic. He hired Ralph McQuarrie, a conceptual design artist who had worked for Boeing.
I'd seen some of his paintings, and I thought he was really brilliant. I had said, look, I want you to do some paintings of these scenes that I've done so that the studio can get a picture of what it is I'm talking about. When I turned in the script, I had about 5 or 6 drawings that I turned in with it also to say, this is what it's going to look like.
He had a concept for a big, spectacular visual, and it didn't come across in the script. So I tried to give it scale, juxtaposing the tiny little figures with the great, spectacular backgrounds. George would say, don't worry about how we're going to do it. We just want to see an impression of what the scenes would look like on the screen.
McQuarrie's artwork won over the Fox Board of Directors, who soon approved a budget of just over $8 million. With only the first part of his Star Wars saga being made, Lucas also needed to think about the future. But his prior dealings with major studios had taught him to be cautious.
When I made the deal for Star Wars, originally I made the deal before American Graffiti didn't even come out, because Alan Ladd had seen the film American Graffiti. He said, I'll make a deal. But he made a very, you're going to make X number of dollars and this kind of thing. And it was a very, one-page memo. When it came up to doing the contract for the film, which was about a year later, I knew that what I really had to do was to protect the unwritten part, the other 2 parts of the script.
All of a sudden, Graffiti comes out, and it's a big, huge smash success. So his agent came back and said, well, hey, look, this guy's made this huge, successful movie now. Don't you think we should get more than $200,000 for writing, directing, and producing a movie? I said, yeah, I think you should get more.
I was very careful to say, I don't want more money, I don't want more points, I don't want anything financial, but I do want the right to make these sequels. I was working on the assumption, as every filmmaker works on, which is the film will be a disaster, and that it won't be promoted and it'll just die a horrible death. And it'll be very hard to get these next 2 movies made.
George said, like a big slice of the merchandising. Up until that time, merchandising had been relatively unknown.
When I took over the licensing, I simply said, I'm going to be able to make T-shirts, I'm going to be able to make posters, and I'm going to be able to sell this movie, even though the studio won't. So I managed to get control of pretty much everything that was left over that the studio didn't really care about.
George was enormously far-sighted, and the studio wasn't, because they didn't know that the world was changing. George did know the world was changing. I mean, he changed it.
With his Star Wars contract completed, George Lucas now needed a rebel force up to the challenge of production. In the summer of 1975, he founded the visual effects company Industrial Light and Magic.
There was no special effects companies in those days, and the studio's special effects department had been disbanded. Part of that was because of the expense, and part of it was that the American taste, the culture had gone toward very realistic-looking films.
We approached the visual effects as a grand experiment and saying, can we do this with a lot of people who work on architectural models and in commercials and have never made feature films before?
We were kind of like a weird kind of fraternity of robotic photography nuts or something like that. I mean, this was a big movie for Fox. We were doing commercials. We all dreamed about doing a feature, and this was like the dream come true. So Star Wars came along just the perfect time for us.
We moved into a big empty warehouse in Van Nuys, right near the Van Nuys airport, and basically started from scratch. I mean, it was empty. In the early days, you used to park your car inside. There was no cam equipment, no rooms to speak of.
Supervising at ILM was John Dykstra, an effects cameraman who had worked under Douglas Trumbull on films like Silent Running.
I was essentially to be responsible for doing the visual effects for the film. We took the concept of motion control, which is essentially an old concept of being able to duplicate camera motion through more than one pass so that you can generate multiple elements of film, and we made it production savvy by tying it into a computer, which was at that point custom-built microprocessors. There were no PCs. You didn't go down buying a PC. We built them from scratch.
At the same time the camera system was being built, another team began constructing model spaceships.
I was one of the early hires. They had a small art department, and there were some concept models made out of cardboard and model kit pieces. There were some storyboards and some concept illustrations that Joe Johnson had done. There were some paintings that Ralph McQuarrie had done.
Everything came either from my sketches or Ralph's paintings and drawings and any input that George might have, you know. There wasn't a lot of outside influences on Star Wars.
George wanted it to look like you could actually see the rivets, so you could see the logic of how it was made. I was originally hired to work on the Death Star, the 40 foot by, what was it, 40 by 80 feet or 40 by 60 feet or something like that. Nobody wanted to do the job because you had to spend a lot of time on your knees.
Everybody sort of could cross-train and work in different techniques. That was different than the Hollywood system that had very strict sort of union rules. But there was no way that this work could be done that way, or no way that the Hollywood unions could understand what we were doing.
With pre-production gaining momentum, Lucas next began the process of casting his galactic opus. He shared the audition stage with his friend Brian De Palma, who was seeking actors for the Stephen King shocker, Carrie.
It just happened that we were both making these movies and casting at the same time, so we decided to combine our efforts. I've made movies with very young people that have no track record, so I have to kind of go through and discover them, pick them, and then test them and go through them and have readings. And so it takes a long time. I spent probably 6 or 7 months casting Star Wars, and that's a long process to sit in a little room and interview people. And I interviewed thousands of people.
In casting the male leads, Luke Starkiller and Han Solo, Lucas looked for individual screen presence as well as chemistry between performers.
Well, it checks out again. There's no mistake. You can't find Organa Major?
I found it. It's just not there.
Oh, I found it. It's just not there. What's left of it is contaminated. That's it there.
Look at those radiation readouts. It's impossible. I've never seen anything like it.
The Empire must have gotten here first.
The planet has been completely blown away.
For the pivotal role of Luke, Lucas needed an actor who could project both intelligence and integrity.
Yeah, well, she's part of the royal family. They won't get anything out of her. She knows the power of mind control.
She's part of the royal family. They won't get any information from her. She knows the art of mind control.
24-year-old Mark Hamill was a familiar face on television. A newcomer to films, his wholesome, easygoing manner fit the part perfectly.
I can remember a line from the screen test, which I don't think ever will leave me.
And Luke says, but we can't turn back. Fear is their greatest defense. I doubt if the actual security there is any greater than it was on Aquilai or Sullust, and what there is most likely directed towards a large-scale assault.
Fear is their greatest defense. I doubt if the actual security there is much greater than on Aquilai or Sullust, and what there is most likely directed towards a large-scale assault.
And I read that line, I thought, who talks like this? So I just did it sincerely.
Well, how many more systems have to get blown away before you have no place to hide and are forced to fight? Don't you realize what's going on?
Kid, you take the glory and the good intentions. I'll take the reward.
The role of Han Solo needed someone older, with a more cynical edge.
What's that little droid carrying that's so blasted important?
What's the little droid carrying that's so important?
Harrison Ford had worked with Lucas on American Graffiti, but because the director initially only wanted new faces, he was not allowed to audition.
Wait a sec, do I have to sit up to get in the right?
Instead, he was brought in to feed lines to the other actors.
I was given sides and asked if I would help read the other actors. It became my task to explain to the other actors who were coming along just what it was that these sides were meant to be about.
They're gonna follow us, they'll destroy your hidden bases, they'll destroy the whole system.
Right, I know they'll follow, and they'll bring the Death Star too.
Lucas may have been reluctant to use Ford at first, but the actor won him over by giving Han a mix of mercenary swagger and world weariness.
All right.
Well, what was so clear was what the idea was of the character relationships. Mark was the callow youth, and I was the smartass, and we each had a clear section of turf to explore.
The planet's totally blown away. It would have taken 1,000 ships with more firepower than I've ever seen to do that. If the Empire had a new weapon that could do this, I'd know about it. I'd have heard something.
Well, you know about it now. The enemy's on the move. We haven't much time.
Well, I brought you here. Now what?
We've got to find the rebels. What we're carrying belongs to them.
Their bases are very well hidden, son. All the power of the Empire can't find them. Do you know where they are?
No, not anymore.
Well, I'm not going to take you on an impossible chase across the galaxy.
Virtually every young actress in Hollywood tried out for the part of Princess Leia. Although the character was the same age as Luke, as a leader of the rebellion, Leia needed to project a confidence beyond her years.
The plans and specifications to a battle station with enough firepower to destroy an entire system. Our only hope in destroying it is to find its weakness, which we will determine from the data I stored in R2.
Now, our only hope in destroying it is to find its weakness, which we'll do from the data I stored in R2. Okay, now we captured the plans in a raid on the Imperial shipyards, but we fell under attack before I could get the data to safety, so I hid it in R2 and sent him off.
When R2 has been safely delivered to my forces, you get your reward.
What?
You have my guarantee.
What's the little droid carrying that's so blasted important?
The plans and specifications to a battle station with enough firepower to destroy an entire system.
One actress in particular seemed tailor-made to play a princess. As the daughter of actress Debbie Reynolds and singer Eddie Fisher, Carrie Fisher was the product of Hollywood royalty. She had no trouble conveying the self-assurance needed for Leia